I will introduce Kynan. Kynan is a meditation teacher who is interested in helping students to achieve their meditation goals, whatever they may be. He takes a collaborative and student-centered approach to exploring the depths of what is possible through the many dimensions of practice. Kynan believes that meditation has enormous potential for creating positive change and opening up space for new ways of relating to experience. Kynan has experience across a range of meditative and introspective traditions and techniques. He brings his experience as an artist, musician, and programmer into his understanding and sharing of Dhamma teachings in a way that is clear, practical, and creative. Kynan is authorized to teach by Dr. Tucker Peck, a clinical psychologist and meditation teacher. So, with that, I will pass to you, Kynan, for your talk on the possibilities of practice. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Meredith. Okay, I'd just like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land. I'm on the land of the Gadigal and Wangul people of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present. It's so great to be here, and it's so great to see you all here for this talk. And I really love the the chats that happen before the talk starts as well. It's so nice to have this sense of community and this sense that we're all gathering to meet and share ideas and to catch up with each other. So in the spirit of that, I'd like to ask, that put me in the spotlight. Okay, gallery view, there we go. I'd like to ask if you're able to turn your camera on. I'd just like to invite you to do that if that's comfortable for you. I'm also going to ask you a few questions, and I'd like people to raise their hands at certain times. So if you're comfortable putting your camera on, being visible, that would be great. But of course, no problem if not. So with the talk tonight, just a couple of things before we get into it. One thing is that when it comes to teaching Dharma and to teaching meditation, there's this this idea that we need to teach in a way that helps the person that we're talking to. So, the Buddha taught in many different contexts and would give different advice to different people depending on who he was talking to and what that person needed. And there's this great quote by Ajahn Chah where he says that when he sees someone, it's like the people are going down a road, and when he sees someone that's about to fall into a ditch to the right of the road, he says to them, "Go left, go left." And when he sees someone falling into a ditch on the left-hand side of the road, he says, "Go right." So the advice is sometimes different. And in the context of this talk, I guess I just want to say that maybe this will land with you where you are. Maybe it's not quite for you, or maybe it's something to put in your pocket for later. Okay, so in terms of the basic overview of what I'd like to do tonight is I'm going to talk for about half an hour, maybe 40 minutes, and then we can do a guided meditation. And then at the end, I'd like to have plenty of time for questions. So if you do have questions throughout, we can see how we go, but there'll definitely be time at the end. The key idea that I'd like to get across tonight is that it is possible to transform your experience using meditation and Dharma practice. You just have to do it. So that's the key idea. This came to me, one thing I was thinking about that came to me around this topic was my partner and I, we've been together a really long time. And so we do a lot of little silly things in the ways that we talk to each other. And one of the things we started doing was I would ask her if there's something she wants to do, or something, if there's a food that she wants or something she wants to do, and she would say, "Oh, couldn't possibly." And then I started saying back to her, at some point, I started saying, not with that attitude. And I think this is actually something that applies to Dharma practice in a lot of ways. Sometimes we kind of limit ourselves. We think that some of the teachings of the Buddha or some of the practices or some of the ways that are presented by teachers of practicing, we think, oh, couldn't possibly, like, that's not for me. And I like to bring this idea of like, maybe that attitude is an obstacle in some sense. And like, actually, there's definitely times when we want to open up the sense of possibility. We want to open up the sense of what we can achieve in our lives. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to do now is I want to get a sense of the practice that everyone does. So what I'd like you to do is put your hand up if you've been on a meditation retreat, for 1 day or more. Hands up. Okay, now keep your hand raised. Oh, that's everyone. Awesome. Keep your hand raised if you've done 2 days or more. 3 days. If you've done a week or longer. If you've done more than a week. Whoa, more than 2 weeks. Okay, cool. Wow, this is a pretty advanced group. That's awesome. And how about daily meditation practice? Oh, Amy, I see you raised your hand, but I think that's a little bit hard to control the up and down of the Zoom hand. Good effort though. Okay, how about daily meditation practice? So who here practices at least a few times a week? Hands up. Okay, cool. Who here practices most days of the week? Cool. And now let's do time. So like 15 minutes a day or more, 30 minutes a day or more, 45 minutes a day or more, an hour a day or more. Okay, cool. Awesome. That gives me a pretty good idea. That was sort of what I was expecting, but like it's great to see that people are practicing. So that gives me good information for what to talk about. Okay, so the type of teaching that I like to do is student-centered and pragmatic. So I'll explain what I mean by that. So when I talk about pragmatic Dharma, there's different ways that people approach this, but what I mean when I say it is that I like to teach in a way, and the sort of tradition that I'm coming from, or the school that I'm coming from, we teach in a way where we, first of all, we say to do what works. If something works for you, then it is a good practice. There's no single practice that everyone should be doing. In Pragmatic Dharma, we like to talk openly about meditation and the possibilities of practice. And I think this is a little different from how we might receive Dharma teachings in some traditions. And the third thing about Pragmatic Dharma is that we tend to practice a lot for lay people. We're doing home practice, we're going on retreats. Yeah, it's great to see you all here, that you are also practicing in your home life, but also going on retreat. And so when I talk about student-centered teaching, there's also 3 points for this. The first is that all the techniques work. I think that all the different meditation techniques do actually work. It's just that some work better for others, and some are presented in ways that are like really accessible to certain people at certain times. The second point is that when I'm teaching, I really try to meet students where they're at. So I try to understand what the student is going through and what their experience is and what could help them. And the third point is I try to help students work with the obstacles and overcome difficulties. So specifically like trying to figure out what will help this person at this time and how can we collaboratively sort of figure out ways to get through that. But of course, trusting that the students sort of know best in a lot of cases. They know themselves better than I know them, and they have strengths that allow them to practice in really good ways. Okay, so this is just to frame the way I approach teaching and the way I approach meditation, Dharma teaching and meditation teaching. This approach, I think, from what I've seen, it's been incredibly effective. It definitely, so I was just in the United States. I went on a 17-day meditation retreat in the desert in Arizona at a retreat center called Diamond Mountain. And so for the first 10 days of this retreat, I was shadowing my teachers. So Tucker, who we mentioned, who I studied under, and Upali is the co-teacher. And both of them have taught me a lot. And I got to sort of observe what happens behind the scenes over the course of a 10-day retreat. And what I noticed is like every single person left the retreat with something that they gained. You know, they gained some insight, they gained some different understanding of their own experience, they gained something valuable that they could carry with them into the future. And I think this is what we tend to find when we dedicate time to practice. The time that we put in, the efforts that we put in, they do help a lot. And especially when we do so with support, with community, and with instruction that actually helps us at the time. So I guess I want to talk a little bit now about my own path in meditation and in Dharma. And then I'd like to also sort of go into more about what I think is possible for lay practitioners. Before I do that, no, let's leave that to later. Okay, so my own path with meditation was that I moved to Sydney in 2015 to start my PhD studies. And when I moved to Sydney, it was a really exciting time. There was a lot happening, but it was also a really difficult time. I found myself in a new city. I didn't have many friends. Some of the friends that I thought I had, weren't as available for me as I thought. I was studying and also started teaching at the university that I was studying at. And I was also trying to do like different activist work around the arts and arts funding. And what I found was that I burnt out pretty hard and had a period of depression and anxiety that was pretty unpleasant. I'm not sure where that ranks in terms of like a clinical diagnosis, but for me at the time, it was really awful. I had periods of time where I really couldn't get out of bed. I was sort of stuck in the house. I tried to keep working, but every time I did, it sort of just made me feel worse. And this went on for some time, maybe about 18 months, I think. When I did actually manage to come out of it a bit, I found that I looked back on the time and I was thinking to myself, my life was objectively great. I was on a scholarship. I was studying something that I was really passionate about. I had work, I had friends, I had a loving partner, but subjectively, my experience was terrible. I was like really miserable. I wasn't relating to things in a good way. And I was causing myself all this pain by the additional stress that I was adding on to everything. And so I kind of got out of the depression in large part by doing like a yoga asana practice being more physically active and cutting back on work, changing the ways I related to things. But what I realized was that I needed to work with my mind in some way. I needed to find a way to change how I related to these experiences. Otherwise, it was pretty obvious to me that like I wouldn't be able to handle stressful experiences, and that stressful experiences were going to keep coming. Like I knew that there was just going to continue to be ups and downs that I couldn't avoid. So it was around this time that a friend, I'd been meditating like in little bits here and there, but around this time, a friend gave me a copy of the book, The Mind Illuminated. Um, Maybe hands up, who here has heard of The Mind Illuminated? Okay, okay, cool. So it's a book, it's a really detailed guide on how to do shamatha meditation primarily. It's based off of the elephant path. So if you've ever seen the image in sort of Tibetan Buddhism, where there's like a winding path with an elephant that's going up and a meditator that is next to the elephant. It describes the book TMI, or The Mind Illuminated, describes 10 stages of shamatha, where you progressively develop more stable attention. And yeah, it's a really, really clear and detailed guide. And I found that this really helped. At first, I sucked at it and I couldn't practice very long. But gradually, I worked up the amount of time I was practicing. Maybe it took me about a year to like go from 10 or 15 minutes a day up to about 45 minutes, and then up to an hour. And there was actually a sort of threshold there. I was looking back at my notes in my journal that I'd kept at the time, and I saw that there was actually like a jump there. And I actually remember I had this conversation with my friend, and I was saying like, oh yeah, I practice 10 or 15 minutes a day. I'm just really distracted the whole time. It's kind of frustrating, but I think it's good, so I'll keep doing it. And he said to me, oh, well, maybe you actually just need to practice longer. And so I went away and I thought about it, and I started practicing. I think I jumped up to half an hour, and I noticed like one of the meditations, and I checked out the journal entry for this. One of the meditations, it got to 20 minutes, and things before that were just like, yeah, really distracted, getting sleepy. Mind is chaotic. I have a friend who likes to describe the distracted mind as a box of frogs, which I think is a great description. I think that's exactly what I was feeling at the time. The first 20 minutes, my mind was a box of frogs. And then something shifted, and like I dropped into some kind of stillness, like the mind just settled, the sort of chaos calmed down a little bit. Not a huge amount, but just enough that I noticed something happening. And this was a light bulb moment for me, that like, oh, actually, what I'm doing is working. I just need to give it time. I don't need to make it do anything. It doesn't need to be great all the time. But just by practicing, just by spending the time sitting quietly, I'm cultivating something. And so from there, that was a big moment. From there, I kept practicing, and the practice kind of took off. I found that I was able to follow the instructions. It was really up and down, but there were signs of improvement maybe over months of practice. And I found that I felt better in daily life. I was feeling more calm. I was a bit clearer, more mindful. And by mindful, I mean like day-to-day experiences had a bit more space around them. I was able to sort of notice what was happening without getting so caught up all the time, getting really tight around certain experiences. And so for me, this is where the practice kind of took off. I really found that there was this sort of quality that came from the practice that was really nice. And I think, it took a while to get there, but once I did start noticing some of these benefits, particularly the benefits in daily life, it gave me a certain confidence about the practice that made me want to keep practicing. So from there, I went and did a retreat I found a teacher, and that's when I got in touch with Tucker, and we've been meeting for the past few years online. And the practice kind of took on a life of its own. And I have to say that I think meditation has been the most important thing that I've done for myself in my life. Um, it's really transformed my experience. Um, and by that, I mean like it's created a new way of being able to relate to experience, of being able to engage with the world in a more open and direct way, to be more present, and to be able to like work with my emotions, and to work with the things that I'm feeling, to work with relationships, and to be able to like know what it is that I'm doing and what it is that I want to be doing and what I believe will be helpful, and to sort of create that sense of alignment between what I value and my actions. And so, yeah, this sense of transformation, I think, is really what I found from the practice, and it's the reason that I'm teaching now is I want other people to be able to experience this kind of transformation, to move uh, towards alignment, to move towards having their values be enacted in their life. So what is possible from meditation practice? I think all of the things I've said are actually quite possible for everyone, given enough time and practice. So my approach is that there's this uh, great, what would you call it? It's in the Dhammapada. Let me grab the quote. So in the Dhammapada, the Buddha, I guess this is attributed to the Buddha, I think. The Buddha says, "Don't disregard evil, thinking it won't come back to me. With dripping drops of water, even a water jug is filled. Little by little, a fool is filled with evil. Don't disregard merit, thinking it won't come back to me. With dripping drops of water, even a water jug is filled. Little by little, a sage is filled with merit." And so this is often sort of paraphrased to say that you fill a water jug, or a bucket, some vessel. You fill a bucket drop by drop, and filling the bucket eventually, if we're filling the bucket of enlightenment, filling the bucket of loving kindness or of compassion, we do it drop by drop. And this is my approach. I think that all practice is valuable, all the practice adds up. And this is what I found once I started doing, once my practice started sort of working, or it found its way to being something that was beneficial, that was cultivating positive qualities. I realized that all I needed to do was like block that time out and set my timer each day. And that by doing so, I was cultivating good qualities. Um, there couldn't be anything bad about being mindful, being aware for that time of feeling what was present in my experience, of trying to cultivate calmness and clarity. There's another quote I really love. This one's from the Bhagavad Gita, which is a classic Hindu yoga text. The quote goes, "On this path, no effort is ever wasted, no gain is ever reversed. Even a little of this practice will shelter you from great sorrow." This has been another reminder for me over the course of my practice, that any effort you put in pays off in some way. It's never wasted. There's no turning back. There's no reversing the benefits of the practice. It all adds up. It all helps, and it particularly helps with sorrow, with suffering. There is a reduction in suffering through the practice. Okay, so before I go into this next bit, I just want to say that I think sometimes with Dharma talks, and I'm definitely guilty of this, sometimes with Dharma talks, we want to hear what we kind of already agree with. We go to a Dharma talk waiting for the teacher to say something that we can be like, oh yeah, I know that. I agree with that. And I think sometimes it's actually good to hear something that maybe feels like a little bit of a challenge, or it feels like it's sort of testing your comfort zone a little bit. And so with that in mind, I guess I want to talk a bit about what people tend to expect from practice and what people, how people view their own practice. So what is actually possible for lay people? What is possible for us as modern practitioners? So certainly there are some disadvantages to being a layperson that lives in the modern world. We have a lot of distractions and we have a lot of complexity, right? We're sort of asked to work jobs, we're asked to have relationships, we have hobbies, we're asked to sort of take care of ourselves, take care of people around us. We're also sort of asked to be like on top of things and knowledgeable about like current affairs and what's going on in the world. There's like a lot happening that we're asked to do. But at the same time, there's certain advantages to practicing as a modern layperson. For one, we have lots of great resources. The fact that we're joining this Dhamma talk via Zoom from all different locations is actually an amazing opportunity. And yeah, I'm going to join a sutta study class that's happening in Redwood City, California. So I'm joining that tomorrow. And I think like they had an address field on their sign up form. And I thought that was pretty funny. Like I don't think they actually need my address. I'm a 15-hour flight away. But yeah, anyway, it's pretty cool that we get to do that. We can study with all sorts of teachers. There's an incredible range of resources of videos, talks, books, so many of which are available for free online. So that's one thing that's really great. In the suttas, the Buddha actually often taught lay people and did actually expect quite a lot from lay people in terms of practice. There's a sutta as well where the Buddha lists 81 of his foremost disciples, and 21 of these were lay people. So 21 out of the 81, so about a quarter, were actually lay people. And this was in a time when the Buddha was, I think, more often teaching monastics, which I think is quite interesting. And out of these 21 lay people, Chitta, one of the lay people listed, was said to be among the foremost in teaching the Dhamma. And I think this is quite interesting that we have this opportunity to sort of spread the Dhamma in a different way as lay people. There's also another layperson that the Buddha talks about who was really skilled at bringing people to the Dhamma and really skilled at inviting people in to the Buddha's teachings. And I think this is another reason that we have a special opportunity because we actually can create some of the conditions that support the Dhamma teaching, that support meditation and support communities. And I'll go into the community aspect in a minute. Okay, so I think when it comes to what we think is possible in meditation practice and from Dharma practice, there is, of course, a spectrum of expectations. And on one end of the spectrum, there is the side where we're a bit too attached to the goals, or we think that that what we're trying to get to should happen to us really soon. Then on the other end of the spectrum, we might think, yeah, this is not possible for me at all. And maybe all those people who've said that they've gotten benefits from the practice, maybe they're just lying, or maybe it didn't happen that way, or it did happen for them, but it can't for me. So I like to think of this in terms of we want to find a balanced way to hold our goals. We want to find a way to keep the goals in mind and to keep the possibilities in mind, but to hold them lightly. So there's this sense of action without attachment to consequences. I was listening to a Rob Babea talk, and he, I should have looked up the name of this, but he was talking about this, a woman who rowed a boat, rowing, across I think across the Pacific Ocean and then across the Atlantic Ocean. And she said that when you row across the Atlantic Ocean, it takes 1,000,000 strokes. It takes rowing 1,000,000 times. You can't get far with one row, but you have to do each row to get across. And I think that's a great way of thinking about this. This is the drops in the water jug, right? This is the no effort is ever wasted. But if you start rowing and you think that it's not possible to get across the ocean, then it's unlikely that you will. It's unlikely that you'll make it. Okay, so I guess what I'd like to say is that we need to maintain some sense of possibility. There needs to be some sense of confidence or faith that what has been taught and what has been passed on can work for us, that it is true in some sense, it has worked for other people, and that if we try it in our own experience, that will build our confidence when we see that there is progress to be made, there are benefits to be gained. And I think one of the ways to do this is to keep in mind this idea that we have our goal ahead, and we keep the sense of possibility of what the goal is, but we hold the goal very lightly. If we're thinking particularly about the lofty goals of Buddhism, right? So one of the tricky things to talk about in Buddhist practice is the idea of awakening, right? Which I think is quite funny because it's right there in the title. The Buddha is the awakened one, right? And so Buddhism is the teaching of the awakened one. The Buddha Dhamma is the truth of the awakened one. But we've got this idea of awakening, right? And everybody defines awakening differently. It's a hard idea to talk about. It's a hard concept to grasp. But there is this idea of awakening in some sense, which maybe very loosely defined, we could say, is this like radical shift in perception so that suffering is alleviated. It creates freedom, it creates relief, and also opens up loving kindness, it opens up compassion. So let's very loosely define awakening as that. And let's say that the ultimate goal is full awakening, to be free from suffering. And if we have that, it's quite a lofty goal, but let's keep that like out in the distance, right? What if it would take 40 or 50 years of practice to get there? Or maybe more, what if it's going to take you your life to get there? But each step along the way brings benefit. Each step along the way helps. And as you progress along the path, there is noticeable improvements. Things just keep getting better. And perhaps the best way to measure this is like year by year, or maybe in like 6-month intervals. Or if you're, I guess if you're looking at your practice at a closer level, 3-month intervals, something like that. Do things improve in daily life? Are things getting better for you? And I think most people would say that they are. With practice, things do tend to improve, and particularly improve in the way that you relate to things. Not necessarily that the conditions improve, because of course we can't control the factors of life, but how we relate to those experiences can change. And if we can do that, if we can have the goal way ahead, held very lightly, this is what we're heading towards, but it will take a long time. This is a lifetime practice. But along the way, there are incremental improvements that really do make a difference. Then we can think, okay, what is one step in that direction? What is one step towards that goal? And so for most people that I'm talking to, which are, modern, globalized people, I guess, Australians, Americans, that kind of thing, and some Europeans as well, that I'm talking to. What we're talking about is like generally formal meditation practice. And so I guess I like to think of this as meditation. Formal meditation practice is, of course, not the only part of the path, and it's not it shouldn't be solely focused on, but it does tend to be the thing that builds the skills, it cultivates the mind states, and conditions the mind so that mindfulness in daily life becomes easier, so that coping with difficult situations becomes easier. And so I also think it's a very easy metric, right? If we are practicing formal meditation, we can measure how much time we spend, or we can at least notice when the practice drops off. We can notice when the practice picks up. And so I like to tell people that they should treat their formal practice as this container. You can put effort in to create the container for the practice. You can dedicate yourself and have strong resolve to practice diligently and patiently. And once you create that container, you block out the time to practice, you communicate with your household, say that you are going to be practicing for this time, and it's better not to be interrupted. Once you create this container, then what happens in the practice is sort of protected and sheltered in a way. And you can feel free to sort of explore what is going on in your mind. You can do the different practices. You can work towards cultivating different mind states. But most importantly, what happens during the practice doesn't really matter so much. As long as you're spending the time being quiet, cultivating awareness, good things will happen over time. And that definitely means that sometimes practice will be difficult. Sometimes practice will be fun and easy. There'll be a range of experiences there. But by creating the container, dedicating time to it, good things will happen over time. Okay, so maybe just a final thought on this is that I've been talking to people lately about how important meditation practice is to their life. And so I asked a student the other day, on a scale from 1 to 10, how important is meditation practice? And he barely paused at all and said 9 out of 10. And I think a lot of people feel this way, right? That meditation is important in some way. It's like the thing that you can do that helps you to understand and work with the mind. And it's not always clear what meditation is doing. One of my teachers, Upali, likes to say, meditation does something, is his bold statement. And I think this is actually a good way to think about it. Meditation is very important to a lot of people. It's also something that it's hard to tell what's happening, but if you zoom out enough and you look at it from the right perspective, it's clear that it is doing something. I said that was the final thought, but I have one more thing, which is, I guess what I'm advocating for here is to practice patiently and diligently, and to try to practice in a way of balanced effort, having this goal in mind, taking one step towards it, being patient, allowing the path to develop. The other things that I think are really supportive to this are to have support and guidance. So in Buddhist practice, we talk about the triple gem, which is, we take refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And the way I like to think of this is that the Buddha is, it can be, I think it's best thought of as like the example, someone who has gone further and has provided this inspiration, provided these teachings, provided this sense of confidence or faith. The Dharma I take as the teachings, but also I take it as like, it can be translated as truth or nature. And I think it's the truth of Dharma that can be found in all experiences. We see over and over again how letting go and releasing craving brings less suffering. We can see this in all kinds of different circumstances. And the Sangha, for me, as I guess in the tradition that I'm practicing in, we talk about the Sangha as the community, any practitioners. So not just the monastic community, but the whole community. And for me, this has been really important. I really love to talk about my friends on the path. I really love to talk about this sense of having people to talk with, people to practice with, this sense of support and community, and this sense that we're sort of in it together. And the Buddha, this is an oft quoted sutta, but when the Buddha was talking to Ananda about Ananda was saying to the Buddha that I get it. The path, it's half of the path is noble friendship, noble companions and admirable. Noble friends and admirable companions. And the Buddha says, no, Ananda, you can't say that. The whole of the path is noble friends and admirable companions. With noble friends and admirable companions, you will be expected to develop the Eightfold Path and to develop the practice. I think this is really true. I think if we practice with community, if we practice with the Sangha, it makes the practice easier, and it makes adding these drops to the bucket much simpler, much easier. Okay, I just talked for a long time. I'd really like to do a practice, and then let's get to questions after that. So we'll practice, for about 20 minutes. So if you want to make your way to a comfortable meditation posture, do so now. And take a minute here just to settle in. You might like to adjust your posture, maybe moving side to side, front to back. Perhaps you'd like to adjust how the legs are placed, how the arms and hands are placed. And then finding a sense of stability, a sense of comfort, and a sense of ease. Once you've found your posture, doing your best to remain still and quiet for the duration of this practice. And let's begin by becoming aware of the present moment, noticing whatever is in your experience right now. You might notice external sounds, hearing my voice. Maybe you can hear other people or cars or the fridge. You might also notice body sensations, perhaps noticing the sensations in your hands or the feeling of being supported by the chair, cushion, floor. Just noticing whatever is present for you right now. Allowing the body to settle, allowing the mind to settle, and noticing if anything has been brought up, anything coming up for you so far, hearing this talk, being here with everyone else. And now I'd like you to do whatever practice helps you to calm and settle the mind. So oftentimes we will pay attention to the breath, but you may prefer to do another practice, perhaps metta or awareness of the body. Just going to take a few more minutes here to calm and settle the mind. Gently returning to your meditation object. Coming back to the present moment. Good. And so we're going to try something a little different in this practice. Feel free to follow along, but if you prefer to stay with your breath practice or metta or body awareness, you're totally welcome to keep practicing as you would like. And so if you're following along, the first thing I'd like you to do is to recall your own efforts on the path. Thinking of any time you've practiced with patience and diligence. Thinking of all your efforts to get to this point. You've at least come to this class, so you can also think about that as an act of patience and diligence. Bringing to mind all the times you've practiced coming up against the ups and downs of life and doing the best you could. Good. And now imagine that everything the Buddha taught is possible for you in this lifetime. Now imagine that this radical freedom is possible, that great happiness is possible, that the opening of loving kindness and compassion, the opening of the heart. Imagine that this is possible for you in this lifetime. Recalling the Buddha as a great teacher, as someone who came across a great discovery and shared it with the world, inviting others to also try out and see for themselves. Imagining that this is all possible for you. And see what comes to mind. And perhaps there's a sense of doubt or disbelief. Maybe there's a sense of resistance. Perhaps there is fear. Whatever comes up is totally fine. And there might also be a sense of excitement or joy or happiness. Whatever you notice, just observing that. And now I'd like you to imagine the path forward. So imagining what there is to explore, the possibilities of what you might find on the path, all the richness and meaning of life and of engaging deeply with life and with the practice. And it might help here to imagine walking this path together with everyone else here, with others that you practice with your family, with your community. Sharing the path, walking together, and exploring all the richness and meaning of life, and coming to a deeper understanding of what it means to be a human, to be living on this world. And now see if you can keep this sense of possibility, this sense of walking the path together towards this goal of radical freedom, freedom from suffering, compassion, open-heartedness. Keep that goal in mind, but hold it lightly as a direction to move in, a motivator, a guide. And see if you can return to patiently and diligently taking one step in that direction. One stroke of the paddle across the ocean, one drop in the water jug. Now return back to the present moment, noticing this body, this breath, mindfully aware of what is present for you in your experience. Noticing how you feel now, how these teachings, this meditation has landed for you. Noticing your present moment experience. Take a minute to slowly come out of the meditation, blinking the eyes open. You might want to stretch, move around, drink some water. And then when you're ready, come back to the Zoom. Okay, so I'd love to hear from you. What's on anyone's mind?
Thank you. really found that really interesting and helpful. I suppose after that little meditation, when you talked about having the goal, and it's always been my thing, is that I've been really unclear about the goal, and I've had lots of teachers say to me, getting clearer on your goals is a good idea. It can always help. But when you talk about the drops in the bucket and the drops in the water urn, the water jug, it's what I realize is that over the years, what I felt was real positivity when in that meditation around how much I've gained and how much faith I have in the practice just by those little drops that have dropped into place. Yeah, and I've used meditation I get severe chronic pain because I have a spinal cord injury. So the kind of the sticks there to do my practice every day, because otherwise I just can't function. So I'm given that gift every day. So that's really helped me. But also that's kind of been my goal, is just to get out of pain. But the other goals have sort of happened by themselves in the relationships but to hold that idea of being like liberated like the Buddha in my mind, that's possible, feels completely impossible. Like it's just not there, even though I can see that I've come so far and I've got so much. So I'm kind of interested in what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Sarah. I really appreciate that. And it's great to hear that the practice has helped you and been of some assistance and provided relief, and that you are noticing the drops in the bucket over time. Yeah, I think this is the thing that's tricky for us to talk about as practitioners and as teachers. I guess the way I like to think of it is what I was saying earlier about that goal might be way down the track. So if we're talking about this sort of idea of like full enlightenment, full liberation from suffering, that's way down the other end. And like, I don't think that that is only disheartening if you ignore the progress that you've made already. So the way I like to think of it is, yeah, say the water jug. If the water jug is full, that's like you are a Buddha. If the water jug is a quarter full, that's still pretty good. Like that's making a significant difference in your life. And so thinking of it in terms of a spectrum or as this like progressive development, that really helps me. And that's been my experience as well, that things have gradually improved. Things sort of keep improving very slowly. The way I like to think about the goal aspect of it is we may have these lofty goals that are way down the end, and then we may have some sort of more intermediate goals that we can actually like see improvements on. So I was saying, in a year, in 6 months, in 3 months, we might notice changes happening. And particularly if there are improvements in daily life, being able to cope with difficult situations, being able to have more awareness, being able to know what our emotions are, and be able to navigate situations, improvements in our relationships, that kind of thing. Those sorts of things are noticeable at the time scale of like 3 or 6 months. And that gives me a lot of confidence in the practice. And I think acknowledging how far you've come and what improvements have already occurred is a really good way to have that faith and confidence, and to know that you are heading in the right direction, even if the goal is way down the end. How does that sound to you?
Yeah, and I think that was the power of that meditation, because that little practice you took us through was that focusing on, can't remember, I can't remember exactly what you said, but that thing of, yeah. And I think that sort of brought it together and made, so I wasn't, so when you talked about whether there was fear or doubt, I was like, oh, there's doubt there, but not as much as I would expect. And there's fear there, but not as much fear as I've had in the past. And yeah, so and I think what the little questions you asked before were really helpful in getting me to that place. Because usually I think about that goal and it's like, oh, can't even go there to think about it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's great that you're noticing, like, that doubt and fear are present, but they're less than they used to be. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. But I don't think it would have been less if you hadn't have led into that question in the way that you did, I suppose.
Yeah, maybe you could give
Or the
yourself more
talk.
credit of what your practice has done for
Yeah.
you.
I'll do. Thank you
Awesome.
so much.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Kynan.
Other questions, comments? Richard.
Hi, Kynan. Thanks so much for that meditation. I really, really enjoyed that that little meditation we did just then. My question relates to something that you said in your talk, where you made the comment about trying to align your actions to your values, which I think is a really, really important thing to think about and to review. I'm just wondering, from your perspective and your experiences, how did you do that? Did you think, well, in advance, well, these are my values and I'm going to align my actions, or was it the other way around? You sort of, in retrospect, you think, well, I was sort of organic and I tried this and I tried that, and lo and behold, my actions are now reflecting my values. I'm just interested in the process, because a lot of people might be thinking, oh, I don't really know what my values are. I haven't gone formally sort of set it out that way. And so I'm a bit of a loss of how to, if I'm going to be
Yeah.
aligning my actions to my values, how do I go about doing that? Just curious about whether you have any comments on that.
Yeah, this is a great question. A couple of things come to mind. So the first one is, I mentioned Upali earlier, that he's had particularly lately, a few great lines that I'm going to borrow from him. One of them is that the truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. And I think this actually applies here. So I think actually, I like to take the assumption that we're all doing the best we can, right? Given the conditions that we have, we are actually taking the choices, making the decisions that we think will be best for us. And so I think this process of becoming more aware actually is uncovering gradually, bit by bit, where actions don't align with your deeper values, right? Where you might do something and you might have a pattern of behavior. You might be conditioned to respond in a certain way. And you realize through becoming more aware, through having more spaciousness in the mind, through having more mindfulness, you realize, like, oh, actually, that way I've been doing things is not how I want things to be in the world. It's not how I want to act. And this hurts, right? When you first realize this, it's kind of painful to see that. And I think this is sort of the practice of coming face to face with life and its ups and downs. So that's my first thought, is like, as we move through life and for me, as I've moved through and become more aware and created more space, I've noticed the ways in which I was acting that didn't really line up with what I most valued. And then I was confronted with that and needed to sort of gradually make changes there. And so it was a very gradual process of shifting behaviors here and there, working with the different mental patterns and the conditioning, sort of coming up against the different emotions, the different mind states that would come up, and sort of trying to figure out, okay, this is how things are. What is a good way to work with that? What's a good step to sort of gently guide this in a better direction? My second thought on this is that when we talk about like samadhi practice, when we talk about calming the mind, and sometimes we talk about it as concentration, but like I think a better translation of samadhi is like collectedness or alignment of the mind, bringing our intentions to the mind in a way that there's less friction, there's less conflict. And I think this is actually like a great way to think about what we're doing sort of on different scales. So in the meditation, we're doing this, but beyond the meditation, we're also trying to bring this collectedness and alignment to the different actions we have. And I think we kind of need to operate on these different scales at the same time. Like sometimes we need to sort of zoom in and look at one particular thing that we do. Let's see, like, I like to go on my phone. I sometimes fall into scroll holes where I get stuck on my phone for a bit longer than I'd like to. And like, sometimes it's useful to sort of look at this from a few different angles, right? Like, sometimes I go on my phone because I'm feeling kind of crummy and I like want to do something that gives me like immediate feedback. Sometimes I go on it because I'm kind of bored. Sometimes I go on my phone because I don't know what my next action is that I should be doing. Sometimes I go on it because I actually like just need a break and I don't have something better planned out. And like, I think actually kind of looking at it from a few different angles helps a lot, but also like looking in the context of like the larger picture of like, I'd go on my phone less than I used to, or at least in ways that I don't, that aren't in line with my values, less than I used to. And more of my time is spent doing things that I think are actually pretty good and pretty important and help me and help the people around me. And so I think there's this sort of layered approach. Like in the meditation, we cultivate this collectedness and alignment. And then as we go up out of there, there's these different levels. And this is both like a timescale thing, as well as a like, can we put this into a bigger picture? And can we just gradually move these different actions into alignment? I think the Eightfold Path and the precepts in Buddhism give you some pretty helpful guidelines of like directions to move in as well, right? I don't like to take the precepts as like a strict commandment, but more as like a intention to move in a wholesome direction. What is an action that creates well-being, that creates goodness for you and for others? And what is an action that doesn't do that? And can you move a bit more towards the wholesome, creating well-being? I think that's a really good way to think about that. Does that answer your question, Richard?
Yes, thanks. That was really helpful, Kynan.
Thank you. Other thoughts, questions, practice reports?
Can I just make a comment?
Yeah.
It's probably not really a question, but I just wanted to share when you were talking about or guiding us through sort of setting a bit of a goal and looking forward into what it would be like and how you would travel forward. I kind of didn't have a clear picture or a clear image of that. or any real sense of where I'd go or what I'd do or what my goal might be. But nonetheless, I still felt a sense of sort of opening up and a sense of possibilities. It kind of, I think, still worked really well. I just had a sense of peace that, yeah, the water jug will eventually be filled, even if it takes 1,000,000 paddles or drops. So even without a clear sort of, that, it still felt really good and gave me a sense of possibilities, options.
Yeah, awesome. I love that. Like, I think even sometimes just the sense of possibility or the sense of asking that question seems to open something up. We don't necessarily need the clarity of what the goal is. Just the opening to, like, okay, let's see what comes next. Let's see what comes in the future. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. That was a wonderful 20 minutes. And your whole talk so far. I've been writing notes here as we go. I hope you don't mind.
Of course. Thanks. Maybe one more quick one. We have a few minutes left if anyone has anything.
So Kynan, I think we're talking about the jar of water. I think one of the you can see like achievement is like the awareness of that jar of water, the existence of that jar of water. Like probably before that, some people like practicing without knowing then whether you're in progress or whether there's any benefit. But by being aware that you're actually dropping water into your jar, slowly filling up, I think that is already kind of an achievement for me. Like being aware that you're making that progress in this path.
Yeah. So if I hear you correctly, Meredith, like an awareness, you can actually notice how your life is and what's going on. And you need a certain degree of awareness to actually pick up on what's changing over time. And then noticing that the practice actually helps you go in a good direction. It's filling the water jug.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. I just wanted to have a couple of quick announcements and then I'll pass it over. So yeah, as Sarah mentioned at the start, or Meredith, I think, one of you, sorry. There's a 3-night retreat that I'm leading in January, the 26th to the 30th. And then I'll be leading a 10-day retreat also at Vajrasala in April. So we haven't got it online yet, but if you want to do a longer retreat, keep that one in mind. Also, I'm teaching a day of practice at the Buddhist Library on the 30th of October. And so that's also presented by the Association of Engaged Buddhists. So if you're able to come and practice in person, it'll be a day of practice. So seated and walking meditation, a Dhamma talk, a chance to check in about your practice, and an opportunity to practice with others in community. Information's on our website or on the Buddhist Library website. And finally, my teacher Tucker is coming to Australia, and he's teaching one of these Dhamma talks. That will be on the 17th of November. He'll also be leading a 3-night retreat in the Blue Mountains. So if you want to join that, there's still places available. Information is on my website and on Tucker's website. So that's Tucker Peck is his name. Or you can get in touch with me and I can talk to you more about that. Great, thanks everyone. I've really enjoyed this. I'll pass that back to Sarah and Meredith.
Thank you so much, Kynan, for that talk. Very helpful.
Yeah, I think that's all for today. Thank you so much, Kynan, for your talk. You just got back, I know. I don't know whether you are still jet lagged, but you look pretty fresh to me. And thank you so much for offering your help to the association. And thank you so much for your talk. And good night, everyone. Thank you for
Thank
coming.
you.